for this job, guys. Of course, you're going to need your brake pads. That's back brake pads, right rear, 5mm Allen, 12mm ratchet wrench, 12mm short well socket on a 3/8 ratchet. That is a 4-inch C-clamp, wire brush, WD-40, brake parts cleaner, air gun with a 19mm deep well, and of course air hose with an air compressor. That's literally all we're going to need to do these back brakes. Hey guys, Turtle here again. In this video I'm working on a 2019 Yamaha Wolverine X2. Gentleman asked me to put brake pads on it and replace the wheel bearing on this wheel here and go over the rest of them and see if they need it or not. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with these wheel bearings or not, but it's a two-piece bearing and it's a little more complicated than the typical average wheel bearing that you see on most four-wheelers and side-by-sides, but we'll come back to that. For now, we'll show you what we got going on in the rear end. You can see I got that tire off back there. So I took the back wheel off so that I could check out the brake pads like he said. And if you look, those things are gone. There's nothing left. You should really replace that rotor as well because it's pretty bad. But he's going to opt out from doing that this time. Next time he does brakes, he's going to plan ahead, get the brake pads, get the rotors, have all that stuff together so that he can do it all in one full swoop again when it comes time to do the brakes next time. So for now, we'll go ahead and pull the caliper off and replace those pads. By the way, the lug nuts are 19mm. You can run an impact or 4-way, whichever works easier for you. Either have somebody hold the brake if you already got up in the air, or set down on the ground. That'll keep your wheels stable while you try to break them loose if you're doing it manually. I like to use an impact. I just have a small 6-gallon tank. It seems to do sufficient for these. And the bolts for the brake caliper here are 12mm. You got one on top, there's another one down on the bottom in the back here. But I'm going to use a 3/8 ratchet, 12mm deep well socket, and go ahead and break those loose. I'm going to show this to you guys right here. The bottom bolt for that brake caliper, with the ratchet on there and the socket, even a short well, it was still sticking out too far and hitting over here. Show you what I mean. It's touching right inside here, giving me a little bit of a difficulty. Not a whole lot, but depending on what you got, you might want to consider a 12mm wrench. See, now this won't come off with that bolt backing out, so I'm going to have to run that back in and use a regular wrench to get that out. Alright guys, so I got the caliper off, and at this point I'm going to go ahead and get these loose and go ahead and run the pistons in. You can see that this is a dual piston design, meaning it has 2 hydraulic cylinders coming in, and right here where my fingernail is, that's piston number 1 and piston number 2. So when you get both those pistons pushed all the way back in, they should be sitting flush with the bottom of the shoulder here. They shouldn't be sticking out like that when they're fresh with new pads, as we're about to do. Now I'm going to push those pistons in the same way you do a lot of the older vehicles, even a lot of modern ones. Just simply using a C-clamp with the old brake pads, push it back, and if you look, I got this thing centered up the best I can. Now I wanted to use a larger 6-inch C-clamp, or excuse me, 8-inch, but the bevel here was too big to fit in the crown on this caliper here, so I had to go down to a smaller C-clamp to make sure that that bevel would sit inside, so it's right on the brake pad. Now if this is a method that you guys are going with, make sure you rotate. Do a couple cranks on this side, loosen up, put it over here, crank it down a few times, go back over here. and go back and forth until you get both pistons pushed inside. And if you absolutely need to, feel free to throw a little bit of a PB Blaster or WD-40s, just something to lubricate those in there a little bit to make those slide just a little bit easier. Another thing, guys, looking at the caliper coming to the back side, there's this Allen key here. That's a 5mm. You got those two of them, one on each side. You're going to back those out counterclockwise, same as most threads. Bring those out. That way this front pad will drop out. And that's just a catch to hold it on while you get everything seated. But you're going to back those two bolts out. Get this outer brake pad out of there. And now with the bolts out, you can see both the brake pads come right out. Those are practically sheet metal at that point. I cannot believe he wore those so thin. Wow. Anyhow, let's get those pistons pushed back in. So remember a moment ago when I was talking about putting some kind of oil or WD-40 on these pistons on the outside there to lubricate that? Well, that's what I'm about to do now. And this is what I've got. I like to go to Rural King and I get a 1 gallon jug of WD-40. One of these cans, it's a 1 gallon jug, and 1 gallon costs about the same price as like a 16-ounce can of aerosol can of WD-40. And you get one of these bottles at Walmart for like $1 or $2. I'd stick a little funnel in there and put some WD-40 in the spray bottle, and you get a lot more that way, and you can control how much you're actually running instead of using aerosol to push it out. This works just fine. Go ahead and spray those up a little bit. Let that sit in there. And we'll start pressing them back in again. Alright, so you can see I got the pistons down in there. That one's sticking out just a little bit further, but I'm going to straighten that out. You can see there's a lot of debris and such inside of there. So I'm going to take a wire brush and I'm going to clean that out just a little bit. And then I'm going to take some brake parts cleaner and spray it out really good before I put the new pads in there. Alright, got it sprayed out. Not looking too bad. Now we're going to go ahead and set the new pads in there and bolt everything back up. And here's the new pads for the rear end anyways. I'm going to size them up, make sure I got the right pads for this particular job. As you can see, everything lines up just right. Don't forget to put these two pins back in on the back side of the caliper before you mount the caliper back to the machine. Remember, that's what holds those brake pads inside of the caliper there. Goes through those ears at the top. Goes through these ears up here and holds that into place in the caliper so they don't fall out. So don't forget those before you re-anchor the caliper to the machine. I'm using my 12mm ratchet on the top bolt. Snug that up a little bit. And now I'm going to use my 12mm ratchet wrench on the bottom bolt here. Snug that up. Now I'm actually going to go ahead and tighten down these dowel pins a little bit and snug those up. And you can see I'm using just a standard 5mm Allen here. Got the short turn on the head there. There she goes. good and snug. And that side's buttoned back up. And you can see we've got brand new pads in there now. Once we actually pump them up, the pads will sit right. And again, guys, when you have new rotors or good condition rotors, this gap is not going to be that wide. That'll open that up a little bit more. From here, guys, all I'm going to do is I'm going to put the back tire back on, button it down, and then repeat the exact same process on the other side. So to recap, it's 19 millimeter on the lug nuts, 19 millimeter on those. It's 12 millimeters on the sockets that, or the hex heads that hold the caliper on, and 5 millimeter hex Allen that holds the pins in place for the pads. So you got a 5 millimeter Allen, 12 millimeter hex head. You get by with a wrench. I like to use a ratchet on top and wrench on the bottom, ratcheting wrench preferably, and again 19 millimeter lug nut.